I still don't tell this story the right way. Every time I try, I mess up the order. I start at the end, or I skip the part that actually matters and jump to the loud part because the loud part is easier. People want the loud part. They want the bang and the screaming and the running. And I get it. That's the part that ends up on the news. But that's not the part I remember most. The part I remember most is a man standing completely still. Let me back up. Let me tell it slow the way it happened, because if I go too fast you'll miss him. And you can't miss him. He's the whole thing. It was July. Late July, the kind of week where London forgets it's supposed to be gray and just turns gold instead. I'd saved up for 2 years for that trip. 2 years of skipping the nice coffee, packing lunch, all of it. My sister thought I was mad. "You've never even left the country," she said. "Why London? Why not somewhere with a beach?" I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. I just wanted to see the guards. Stupid, right? A grown man, 31 years old, and the one thing I wanted was to stand in front of a palace and watch a soldier in a tall black hat not move. I'd seen the videos. Everyone's seen the videos. Tourist gets too close, guard shouts, tourist jumps out of their skin. I thought it was funny. I thought I'd go, take a picture, laugh, buy a fridge magnet, go home. I didn't know I'd end up crying in an airport 3 days later, trying to explain to a stranger why I couldn't stop shaking. But I'm getting ahead again. See, I told you I'd do this. Slow, let me go slow. The morning it happened was hot, properly hot. The pavement had that shine to it, that wet-looking shine you get when the sun's been hammering stone since 6 in the morning. I remember buying a bottle of water and it was warm by the time I opened it, and I remember being annoyed about that, which is such a small, stupid thing to remember, but the brain does that. Keeps the wrong stuff. I was near the park, the big one. Green everywhere, that soft green London does so well, and there were people everywhere too. Tourists, obviously. You could spot us a mile off, all sunburn and maps and phones held up too high. But locals as well. Men in suits eating sandwiches on benches. A woman jogging with a dog that clearly did not want to jog. Kids. Loads of kids, actually. There'd been some kind of event. A fair or a market or something. And there were balloons tied to a railing, drooping in the heat. And there was the guard. He was standing at his post near the edge of it all, one of those tall stone and iron spots where they stand. And I swear the second I saw him I forgot about my warm water and my sore feet and everything else. He was younger than I expected. That surprised me. In my head they were all 40-year-old men with granite faces, but this one, he couldn't have been more than 23, 24. Smooth face, sharp jaw, and those eyes that looked at nothing and everything at the same time. He didn't move, obviously. That's the point. But there's not moving and there's not moving, and this was the second kind. It wasn't stiff. It wasn't a man trying not to move. It was a man who had somehow decided, deep in his bones, that stillness was just what he did now, like breathing. I stood there like a fool for about 10 minutes just watching him. A little girl, maybe 6, 7, walked right up to him, so close her nose was nearly touching his sleeve, and she looked up at him with her mouth open, and her dad was laughing and filming, and the guard didn't even blink. And the girl said, really loud, "Is he a statue, Daddy?" And a few people laughed. And I laughed. And here's the thing I keep thinking about. Here's the thing that eats me. He heard her. Of course he heard her. He was a person. He had ears and a heartbeat and a mum somewhere who worried about him. He heard a little girl call him a statue, and he chose in that second to let her believe it, to give her that little bit of magic. I didn't think about any of that at the time. At the time I just thought, cool, a guard. I took a photo. It came out blurry. I've still got it. Okay, so that's the calm, that's the before. Now I have to tell you about the men. I noticed them because they didn't fit. That's the only way I can put it. Everyone else in that crowd had somewhere to be or nowhere to be, and either way they were relaxed about it. These three, they were not relaxed. They were moving. You know how a wolf moves through sheep and the sheep don't clock it, but you can if you're standing on a hill above it all. It was like that. Three of them, young, hoods up, which it was 30 degrees, nobody had hoods up. Everybody was half-dressed and melting, and these three had their hoods up. That's the first thing that snagged in my head. Hoods, in that heat. I want to be careful here because I don't want to make them into monsters in your head. They were just lads. That's the horrible part. If you'd shown me a photo of any one of them, I'd have said that's someone's son. That's a kid. But there was something wrong in the way they moved, all clustered tight, heads down, looking at everything from under their brows. One of them was tall and thin with a scar through his eyebrow. I'd learn later his name, but I didn't know it then, so I just called him the tall one in my head. One was shorter, heavier, jittery, couldn't keep still, kept bouncing on his heels. And the third was calm. Calmer than the guard, even. And that scared me more than the other two put together because the calm one had a bag. A backpack, dark, heavy-looking. He carried it like it mattered. I noticed all of this in about 4 seconds, and then I told myself I was being dramatic. Because that's what you do, isn't it? You see something off and your brain goes, don't be silly, you're on holiday, you've been reading too much news. Nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. Look, there's an ice cream van. So I looked at the ice cream van. I am ashamed of that. I looked at the ice cream van. By the time I looked back, the three of them had drifted toward the guard. And I mean toward him on purpose. There's a way people fan out when they're circling something, and they were doing it. Slow, casual if you weren't watching. The tall one to the left, the jittery one to the right, the calm one with the bag straight in front. They stopped a few feet from him. Nobody else seemed to notice. That's what I can't get over even now. The whole park was carrying on, balloons, ice cream. Someone somewhere was playing music off a phone speaker, tinny and cheerful. A pigeon was doing that stupid strutting thing pigeons do. Life just happening. And in the middle of it, 3 young men had quietly surrounded a soldier, and only I seemed to be looking. Well, me and him. Because he'd clocked them, I could tell. Nothing on his face moved, nothing, but there was a change. I can't explain it better than this. It was like the air around him got heavier. He was already still, but now the stillness had a shape to it, like a spring that's been wound one turn tighter. The tall one said something to him. I couldn't hear it. I was maybe 30 feet away, off to the side, and there was all that noise. But I saw the tall one's mouth move, saw him lean in, saw the little smirk. The guard didn't answer. Of course he didn't. They're not allowed. Even I knew that. You can stand there and scream in his face, and he's trained to look through you like your glass. The jittery one laughed. Too loud. That fake laugh you do when you're scared and pretending not to be. And the calm one just watched the guard, set the bag down between his feet, real gentle, and stood back up and watched. That's when my stomach dropped. That's the moment. Because a man doesn't set a heavy bag down gently unless there's a reason to be gentle with it. I want to tell you I did something. I want to tell you I shouted or ran for help or grabbed a police officer. I didn't. I stood there with my warm water bottle in my hand and my heart going like a drum, and I did absolutely nothing because I didn't know anything, not really. I just had a feeling, and what do you do with a feeling? You can't run up to a policeman and go, "Excuse me, those lads look a bit off and one of them's got a bag." So I stood there, and I watched a bad thing get closer. The tall one got braver. That's how it goes with a crowd. One of them gets a laugh, the others push further. He stepped right up into the guard's space now, close enough that I saw the guard's eyes shift, just barely, just a flick, to keep him in view. He was saying things. I could tell from the shape of it that they were ugly things. The kind of things people say when they've decided a person in a uniform isn't a person anymore, just a target that isn't allowed to hit back. He flicked the guard's hat. Actually reached up and flicked the brim of it. A couple of nearby tourists noticed that at least. There was a ripple. A woman gasped. Someone said, "Oh my God," in an American accent. Phones started coming up because of course they did, of course. Three lads harassing a guard, that's content, that's a viral clip, get it filmed. And still, the guard did not move. I need you to understand what that was, because at the time even I didn't fully understand it. I thought, part of me thought, mate, just deck him. Just once. You're a trained soldier and that's a skinny kid flicking your hat, put him on the floor. Nobody would blame you. Every muscle in my body wanted the guard to do it. He didn't. And it wasn't fear. I've thought about this so much. It absolutely was not fear. It was the opposite of fear. It was a man who had been given a post and told to hold it, and who had decided that holding it meant more than his pride, more than his comfort, more than the burning, obvious urge to smack the smirk off a bully's face. He held his post. The tall one flicked the hat again. Then he shoved him, 2 hands in the chest. Not hard enough to move a trained man braced like that, but hard enough to be a shove, hard enough that everyone watching flinched. And the guard rocked back maybe an inch, and came right back to center like a door swinging shut. His eyes were forward, dead forward, looking at nothing, looking at all of us. And I remember thinking, God help me, I remember thinking clearly, this is going to be a great video. That's where my head was. 10 seconds before everything changed, my monkey brain was already composing the caption. Then the calm one bent down toward the bag. I'll tell you what stillness really is. Real stillness isn't the guard. Real stillness is a crowd of 200 people the exact half second before something goes wrong, when the first few of them feel it before they know it, and everyone just stops. The music kept playing. The pigeon kept strutting, but the people stopped. The calm one had his hand on the zip of the bag. And the guard moved. First time. First time in the whole thing he moved, and it wasn't toward the tall one who'd shoved him. It wasn't at the one who'd disrespected him. It was straight at the bag, straight at the calm one, because somewhere in that trained head of his he'd done the same maths I'd done, but faster, and with training behind it, and he knew. He knew before any of us. And that's where I have to stop for tonight, because the next part is the part that still doesn't feel real, and I want to tell it properly. I owe him that much, to tell it properly. But I'll tell you this before I go. Everyone remembers the bang. Everyone who was there, everyone who saw the news, they all remember the bang near Hyde Park that afternoon. It made every front page. It's a Wikipedia paragraph now, a date and a number. Nobody remembers him. They remember the smoke and the sirens and the number. They don't remember that a 23-year-old in a red tunic and a black hat, who wasn't supposed to move, who'd let a little girl call him a statue an hour before, moved. Toward it, not away. I remember. I'm going to make sure you do too. There's a thing that happens to sound, right before an explosion, that I didn't know about until that day. It goes quiet. Not properly quiet. The music was still playing, the tinny phone speaker, cheerful as anything. But my ears did something, pulled inward like I'd gone underwater. The crowd noise dropped away. The pigeons, the traffic, the woman with the American accent still saying, "Oh my God," all of it went thin and far off, like someone had turned the world down. And in that thin, far-off quiet, I watched the guard move. I've replayed it so many times it doesn't even feel like a memory anymore. It feels like a film I've watched too much. But I was there. I have to keep telling myself that. I was there, 30 feet away, warm water bottle in my hand. He didn't shout. That surprised me later when I thought about it. You'd think he'd shout. But there wasn't time to shout, and I think some part of him knew that shouting would just make people freeze and frozen people die. So he didn't waste it. He crossed the distance to the calm one in, I want to say 2 steps, but that can't be right, it must have been more. It felt like 2. 1 second he was at his post, spring wound and forward-facing, and the next he had a hand on the calm one's arm, the arm that was going for the zip, and he wrenched it back. And the calm one wasn't calm anymore. That's the first time I saw fear on any of the 3 of them. The calm one's whole face just fell apart. Because the guard had him. The guard's hand was iron on his wrist, and the guard's body was already turning him and the bag away from the crowd, away from the little kids and the balloons and the ice cream van, turning the worst of it toward the stone wall and the empty corner where the fewest people were. That's the part nobody talks about. Nobody. In that half second, with no time and no plan, with his own life on the line, he did geometry. He worked out where the people weren't, and he moved the danger toward that. The tall one grabbed at him. The jittery one screamed something. And then the bag went off. I don't have good words for it. I've tried. I've had 2 years to try, and I still don't. It wasn't like the films. In the films, it's this big orange flower, this beautiful, terrible bloom. It wasn't like that. It was a punch. The whole air just punched everyone at once. A wall of pressure that came out of nowhere and hit me in the chest and the face and knocked me clean off my feet, and I didn't even feel myself fall. I just was on the ground. Water bottle gone. One shoe half off, I don't know how. The sound came a beat after the punch, which makes no sense, but that's how it landed on me. A sound so big it wasn't a sound anymore. It was a thing that happened to my body. And then heat. A gust of it, dry and awful, gone as fast as it came. And then dust. Everything went white-gray. Grit in my mouth, in my eyes. I couldn't see. I could hear my own breathing, huge and ragged, and under it, muffled, the screaming starting up. I lay there on the hot pavement in the dust, and I genuinely did not know if I was alive. I want to be honest about that. I didn't feel brave or clear-headed. I felt like an animal. I felt small and stupid, and I wanted my mum, 31 years old, and I thought, this is it. This is how it happens. I saved for 2 years for this. Then the dust started to thin. The first thing I saw was the balloons. Isn't that mad? Of all the things. The balloons were still tied to that railing, and they were still up there, drooping in the heat, completely untouched, bobbing a little in the wind the blast had thrown. Bright red and blue against all that gray. Like they hadn't been told. The second thing I saw was people. On the ground like me. Some of them moving. Some of them not. A man near me was sitting up holding his ear, and there was blood coming through his fingers, and he had this expression, not pain exactly. Confusion. Like he'd been asked a question he didn't understand. I got up, I don't know how. My legs did it without me. And I looked for the guard. It took me a while to find him in the mess, and when I did, my heart just stopped. Because he was down. He was on the ground near the wall he'd turned the blast toward, and he wasn't moving, and his red tunic it was wrong. It was torn and dark down one side, and the tall black hat was gone, just gone, and without it he looked so young. So horribly young. Just a lad on the ground with his eyes shut. And I thought he was dead. For about 10 seconds, which is a very long time, I stood in the dust, and I was sure I was looking at a dead boy who'd been alive an hour ago, letting a little girl believe he was a statue. Then he moved. His hand first, fingers twitching, finding the ground, and then his arm pushing. And I actually said out loud to nobody, "No, stay down, mate, stay down, because you don't get up from that. You're not supposed to get up from that." He got up. Not fast, God, not fast. It was the hardest thing I've ever watched a human body do. He got one knee under himself and stopped, swaying, head hanging. Blood down the side of his face, one arm hanging funny. And I thought, that's it, that's all he's got, and it's more than anyone could ask. But he wasn't getting up to lie back down. He was getting up because he'd heard something I hadn't heard yet. A child crying. Once he was up, swaying, half-blind, one arm useless, his head turned toward it, toward the sound. And I followed his eyes, and I saw her. The little girl, the one from before, the one who'd called him a statue, whose dad had been laughing and filming. She was maybe 15 feet from where the bag had gone off, and she was on the ground. And she was screaming, and her dad wasn't moving. He was near her, face down, and he wasn't moving, and she was pulling at his arm and screaming this one word over and over, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," and I will hear that sound until the day I die. Nobody was going to her. That's the thing about a bomb, I learned. Everybody's dealing with their own patch of horror. Everybody's checking their own body, their own kid, their own everything. The whole park was 200 people each locked inside their own small terror, and nobody had a hand free for a screaming girl. Except him. He went to her. I keep saying it plain because there's no way to dress it up that makes it bigger than it already is. He went to her. Torn open, bleeding, one arm dead at his side, on legs that shouldn't have held him. He crossed that ground to the little girl, and it must have cost him everything, every single thing he had left, and he did it anyway. He got down next to her, slow, careful, and he put his good arm around her and he pulled her in, away from her dad, and he turned her face into his shoulder so she couldn't see, so she wouldn't have that picture in her head for the rest of her life the way the rest of us do. And he held her. I couldn't hear what he said, but he was saying something. His lips were moving against the top of her head, soft, steady, over and over. I like to think it was "you're safe" or "I've got you" or "look at me, look at my hat, where's my hat gone?" Something to give her, some little thing to hold on to, the way he'd given her the statue. I don't know what he said, I'll never know. But she stopped screaming. That's the truth. That's the thing I can testify to if it comes to that, if anyone ever asks. She was screaming and screaming and screaming, and this bleeding boy pulled her into his shoulder and said something, and she stopped. Then people started moving properly. That's how it goes, I think. It takes one. It takes one person to do the impossible thing, and then everyone else's legs remember they work. Once the guard went to the girl, it was like a spell broke. Suddenly there were people up, people running toward the hurt ones instead of away. A man in a suit with his tie gone using it as a tourniquet. A woman on her knees doing chest compressions and counting out loud, so loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there were shouts now, good shouts, useful shouts. Over here. This one's breathing. Someone call, is anyone through to 999? A dozen phones out, this time not filming, this time held to ears with shaking hands. I moved. Finally. 2 years to save for that trip and 30 seconds too late, I finally moved my useless legs, and I went toward the guard and the girl because it was the only thing I could think to do. Get to them, help them, do something. By the time I reached them, the guard was fatting. You could see it. The thing that had held him up, whatever it was, discipline, training, plain bloody-minded refusal, it was running out. He was still holding her, still curled around her, but his eyes were going soft and far away, and his breathing was doing something I didn't like. I got down next to them. I said, I've got you, you can let go now, I've got her. Stupid, the things you say, I don't even know if he heard me. But here's the part. Here's the part I have to get exactly right. He wouldn't let go of her. I reached to take her gently, to lift her off him so I could help him lie flat, so I could see how bad it was, and his good arm tightened. This boy who was maybe seconds from unconscious, this boy with half his side torn open, tightened his arm around a stranger's child and would not let her go until he was sure. Until he'd looked at me, properly looked, eyes swimming, and decided I was safe. That I'd hold her the way he'd held her. Only then did he loosen his grip. And as I took her, she came into my arms light as anything, shaking, this little furnace of a girl with her face still hidden. As I took her, he said the only words I ever heard him say. The only ones. Rough, half gone, barely a voice at all. He said, don't let her turn round. That's it, that's all. Don't let her turn round. Because her dad was still there, on the ground, not moving. And this dying soldier's last clear thought, the thing he spent his last bit of voice on, was making sure a little girl didn't get a memory that would poison the rest of her life. Don't let her turn round. I didn't. I swear to you on everything, I did not let her turn round. I put my hand on the back of her head and I held her face into my chest and I stood up and I walked her away from all of it. And she screamed for her dad the whole way. And I said, I know, into her hair, and I did not let her turn round. I don't remember much of the next bit. It goes to pieces in my head. There were sirens, proper ones now, close, then everywhere. Blue lights strobing through the dust. People in green and yellow moving fast and calm, that trained calm, the same calm the guard had. And I understand now that it's not calm at all. It's just what courage looks like when it's got a job to do. Someone took the girl from me. A paramedic, a woman. She had kind eyes and she said, "I've got her. Love, you did great. I've got her." And I didn't want to give her up. Isn't that strange? I'd known this child for 90 seconds and I didn't want to let her go, but I did. And then I turned round. I turned round, even though I'd told the girl not to, and I looked back for the guard. They were around him. Two of them, then three, then a stretcher, working fast, and I couldn't see him through them, just a glimpse, a boot, a hand hanging down. And I stood there in the wreckage of the best trip of my life, and I thought one thing, over and over, like a prayer, like the only prayer I know. "Please, please," he went at her, "please." They lifted him, carried him, loaded him. And the ambulance doors shut, and it pulled away with the lights going and that horrible urgent sound, and I lost him. Just like that. Gone into the city, into the machine, into the part of the story I wouldn't get to see. I didn't know his name. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I've had to. This person did the bravest thing I have ever seen a human being do, the bravest thing I will ever see, and they loaded him into an ambulance and drove him away, and I didn't even know his name. He was the guard. He was the boy in the red tunic. He was a stranger who turned a bomb toward a wall and a screaming girl into his own shoulder, and I didn't have a single thing to call him. The three men, I should tell you about the three men. Two of them didn't make it, the calm one and the tall one. They'd been closest to the bag, closer than the guard, and well, that's all I'll say about that. I don't feel triumph about it, if you're wondering. I thought I would. I thought when I understood that I'd feel some kind of grim justice. I didn't. I just felt sick and tired and sad about the whole rotten waste of it. Someone's sons. Whatever put them on that path, whatever poison got poured into them, they'd been little kids once too, small enough to call a soldier a statue. The jittery one lived. They caught him running. He's the reason we know as much as we know. He talked in the end, told them everything. But that's part 3. That's the after. That's the part where I find out things I wasn't ready to find out, including the one thing I'd wanted more than anything and dreaded more than anything, which was his name, and whether the name belonged to someone still alive. I'll leave you where I was left. Standing in the gray, one shoe, no water bottle, a stranger's dust on my face, watching an ambulance take away a boy whose name I didn't know. And above me, still tied to that railing, still bright, still bobbing in the dirty wind. The balloons. Red and blue and completely fine, like nothing had happened at all. I have never in my life wanted to scream at anything the way I wanted to scream at those balloons. I didn't go home. I was supposed to. I had one more day on that trip, and then a flight, and my sister waiting at the other end wanting to hear all about the guards and the palace, and whether I'd bought her the fridge magnet I'd promised. I had a whole normal life folded up in a suitcase in a hotel room 3 streets away. I didn't go back to it, not properly, not for days. I gave my statement to the police that afternoon in a tent they'd put up, sitting on a plastic chair with a foil blanket round my shoulders even though it was still boiling, because apparently that's what shock does, it makes you cold in the heat. A young officer wrote it all down. I told him everything. The hoods, the bag, the way the guard turned the blast toward the wall, the girl. Don't let her turn round. He stopped writing when I said that last bit, just for a second. Then he carried on. And at the end he said, "You did well, mate, getting her clear, that was well done." And I said, "I didn't do anything, he did everything, I just carried a kid." And the officer looked at me for a moment and said something I've thought about ever since. He said, "Carrying the kid was the thing that needed doing. He couldn't do it. You could. That's not nothing." I've held on to that. On the bad nights I hold on to that. I stayed in London because I couldn't leave without knowing. That's the honest reason. I couldn't get on a plane and fly home and spend the rest of my life not knowing if he'd lived. It would have been like walking out of a film in the last 5 minutes. Worse, because it wasn't a film. The news had it everywhere by that evening. Explosion near Hyde Park. A number of dead. A number injured. The word terror, and then quickly, cautiously, the walking back of the word terror as they figured out it was, and I'm giving you what came out later, 3 young men, radicalized online, one of them barely 18, who'd built something crude and carried it into a crowd on a hot day in July. The news had all of that. The news did not have him. I sat in my hotel room that first night watching it cycle round and round, the same footage, the same gray aftermath, the same grave voices, and not one of them mentioned a guard. Not one. There was one line about a member of the King's Guard among the injured. That was it. That was all he got. A member of the Guard among the injured, no name, no story, buried in a list. And I sat on the end of that hotel bed, and I got so angry I was shaking. Because I'd seen it. I'd seen what he did. And the whole country was going to remember this day as a horror and a number, and it was never going to know that in the middle of it a boy had done the most extraordinary thing, and I was maybe the only person in the world who'd seen the whole of it from start to finish. And what was I supposed to do with that? Who do you even tell? I started telling people. That's what I did. I couldn't help it. The girl. I need to tell you about the girl, because I found out about the girl before I found out about him, and the finding out nearly finished me off. I went back to the park, or as close as they'd let me get. It was all taped off, tents and tarpaulins and officers standing in that heat. I don't know what I thought I'd find. I think I just needed to stand near it. And there was a sort of thing happening at the edge of the tape, the thing that happens now, people leaving flowers. A little pile of them growing, cards, a teddy bear already. And a woman was standing there, older, gray, and she was looking at me. I must have looked rough. I hadn't really slept, and she said, "Were you here when it happened?" And I said yes. And we got talking the way you do, the way strangers do when something's cracked the world open. And she was local. She volunteered somewhere. She knew things through the local grapevine the news didn't have. And she told me the little girl had lived. I had to sit down on the curb, right there. My legs just went. The little girl had lived. Cuts, a broken arm, and a thing the woman said very quietly, that she wasn't speaking. Hadn't spoken since. But she was alive, and she was going to stay alive. Her dad hadn't made it. I already knew that. I'd known it on the ground, I think, even as I was telling her, I know. But hearing it out loud from a stranger by a pile of flowers made it real in a way it hadn't been, and I put my face in my hands on that curb and I cried like I haven't cried since I was a child. For a man I never spoke to. For a little girl whose name I didn't know. For all of it. And the woman sat down next to me on the curb, this stranger, and put her hand on my back and let me. Didn't say anything. Just let me. London, man, people think it's cold. It isn't. It took me 4 days to find out his name. 4 days of asking, of the internet, of a growing corner of forums and threads where other people who'd been there were doing the same thing I was doing, trying to find the guard. Because I wasn't the only one who'd seen. Of course I wasn't. There'd been 200 people and half of them had had phones up before it happened. The footage was out there. Grainy, shaking, but out there. The 3 lads circling him. The shove. The flick of the hat. And then the ones that cut to static or sky or ground, as the person filming got knocked flat. And people were asking, all over, who is he? Did he make it? Does anyone know the guard? The name, when it came quiet. It always does. A local paper, then a bigger one. A statement. A regiment confirming that one of their own had been seriously injured and giving, at last, a name. I'm not going to give you his full name here. His family's asked for their privacy, and I'm going to honor that, because it's the one thing I can do for them, and because he'd have wanted it, I think. He wasn't a man who moved toward being seen. But I'll tell you he was 23. I'll tell you he was from the north, from a small place, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. I'll tell you he joined at 18 and that people who knew him used the same word over and over in every quote and tribute and post steady. He was steady. That's what they all said. Steady lad. You could rely on him, never made a fuss. Steady. The most heroic thing I ever saw, and the word his own people reached for was steady. And you know what? I think that's exactly right. I think that's the truest thing anyone said about him, because it wasn't a mad burst of glory what he did. It wasn't a film hero's leap. It was a steady man doing, under the worst pressure a human being can face, exactly what a steady man does. Held his post, did the maths, turned the danger away from the children, went to the crying kid. Held on till someone safe could take her. Steady right to the end. And here I have to be careful here, because I've told this story a lot of times now, and this is the part where I've sometimes let people believe what they wanted to believe, because it's easier, because it's kinder. I'm not going to do that to you. He didn't make it either. He held on for 2 days. 2 days in a hospital I never saw, fought over by people far better than me. And on the third morning he died, 23 years old. I found out from a stranger's post online, sitting in that same hotel room, just a line. The regiment, the family, deep sadness, a name. And I sat there and I felt the floor go out from under the whole world. Because I'd let myself hope, 4 days of hopping, of he got up, didn't he? A man who could get up from that could survive anything. And he couldn't. The thing that let him get up was the same thing that used him all the way up. There was nothing left over. He'd spent it. He'd spent every last bit of himself turning a bomb toward a wall and holding a little girl's face into his shoulder, and there was none left for himself. And I have to believe. I think if you told him that in advance, told him the whole price, he'd have done it exactly the same. Steady lad, you could rely on him. There was an inquest eventually, and an inquiry. And in among all the official language, the findings, the timelines, one thing came out that I hadn't known, that none of us who were there had known, and it's the reason I tell this story at all. The bomb went off early. It wasn't meant to go off when it did. The plan, the jittery one told them all of this, the one who lived, he told them everything. The plan was to leave the bag. Set it, walk away, be streets off when it happened. That's why they'd surrounded the guard, why they'd shoved him and flicked his hat and made a scene. It was cover. It was theater. Get everyone watching the guard, drop the bag, drift off in the noise and the phones and the laughing. But he moved. When the guard grabbed the calm one's arm as he went for the zip, I don't fully understand the technical side, and I don't want to. It set it off. There. Right there. Years too soon in their own hands, in the one corner of that park with a stone wall and the fewest people, because a steady lad from the north had grabbed the wrong wrist at the right second and turned their whole plan inside out. They wanted it to go off in the middle of the crowd, where the children were, where the balloons were. It went off at the wall because of him. I think about the numbers sometimes. I shouldn't, it's a grim thing to do, but I do. There were hundreds of people in that park, children everywhere, a market, a fair, whatever it was, and the thing that was built to kill as many of them as possible went off in the emptiest corner, turned there in the last second by one man's hand. He'll never know, that's the thing that undoes me. He died not knowing, he died thinking probably. If he thought anything at all, that he'd failed, that the bomb went off, that people died, that he hadn't stopped it, and he had. He'd stopped the worst of it. He'd stopped the version of that day that would have been 10 times worse, 100 times, and he never knew. So I have to know it for him, and now you do too. I went home eventually. Gave my sister the fridge magnet. I'd actually bought it that first morning before, and it had been in my pocket the whole time, through all of it. And when I found it, I sat on the floor of my hotel room and held this stupid little magnet of a guard in a red tunic and a black hat, and I couldn't stop laughing and crying at the same time, both at once, the way you do when something's broken in you and it's healing at the same time. She's got it on her fridge. She knows the story. She's one of the few I tell it to properly. I looked for the little girl for a long time. I wanted to know she was okay. I never found her privacy again, and rightly, she was a child. But a while later there was a thing in the news, an anniversary thing, and it mentioned without names that the youngest survivor was doing well, was talking again, was back at school. And I chose to believe that was her because I needed it to be and because it probably was. I hope she doesn't remember the worst of it. I hope if she remembers anything, she remembers a warm shoulder and a soft voice and someone telling her she was safe. I hope she never turned round. I did my job. I never let her turn round. I'll finish where these things always end up finishing, with the question people always ask me. They ask, was it worth it, the trip, the 2 years of saving, the skipped coffees, the whole thing for that, for a day that broke you, was it worth it? And for a long time, I didn't have an answer. I've got one now. I saved for 2 years to go and watch a soldier stand perfectly still. That's what I wanted. A man who didn't move, in a tall black hat, holding his post while the world walked past and laughed and called him a statue. And I got exactly what I paid for, that's the thing. I got exactly what I went for. I saw a man hold his post. I just didn't understand until that day what holding your post actually means. I thought it meant standing still. It doesn't. Standing still is the easy version. Holding your post means, when the worst of it comes and everyone else is on the ground and there's a screaming child and a bag full of murder and no time and no help and every reason in the world to save yourself. You move toward it anyway. That's the post, not the standing, the moving when it counts. He held his post. And every single day of my life since, in the small ways, the ordinary ways, the ways that don't make the news, I try to hold mine. I don't always manage it. I'm not a steady lad from the north. But I try. Because he showed me what it looks like, and now I can't unsee it, and I wouldn't want to. So no, it wasn't worth it. Nothing's worth what that day cost. But I wouldn't trade having seen him, not for anything. Somewhere in the north there's a small place where everyone knew a boy, and they called him Steady, and they were right. And somewhere in London, the balloons have long since come down off that railing. But I still see them, red and blue, bobbing in the dirty wind, completely fine, like nothing had happened. And I think that's what he saved. That exactly. A world where the balloons get to stay up, where the ordinary stupid bright things carry on, untouched like nothing happened. He gave everything so that for most people, nothing happened. Steady lad. You could rely on him.